Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we've got ourselves another brand new Mattel Jurassic World figure to take a look at. And even though it actually doesn't say it on the box, I guess this could constitute as a Dino Trackers release because we obviously have the Dino Trackers sort of packaging and stuff. It just says Jurassic World, but it's clearly, kind of released in the timeline of the Dino Trackers figures. But as you can see, we've got the Sound Surge Indominus Rex, and this is one that I was actually pretty hyped about, even though the Sound Surge line isn't incredible. It's kind of like a fairly lackluster line from Mattel. It is something that I've really been enjoying overall, and I do have the majority of the figures. I think there's only one that I missed. I believe there was a Baryonyx out at some point, unless my brain is playing tricks on me. I thought there was a Sound Surge Baryonyx, and I unfortunately missed that one. If there was, maybe that never even existed, I'm not sure. But this is one of the newest ones. In fact, I think it's the only brand new one. Again, the Indominus Rex. And it's going to be pretty cool to have an Indominus in this size range. But you can see the packaging is pretty much, if we hold it here to the side, pretty much the standard as far as what you usually get when it comes to the Sound Surge line. Then over here, you can see we've got a sneak peek that you can push the button to kind of check out the noises of the figure, also the Jurassic World logo. And then over here, kind of a sneak peek of the Indominus as well. And then here on the back, if we push it all the way back over there again, you can see what figures are in this wave of Sound Surge, as we have the Indominus again here. Boy, it looks so rough without any painted nails. But you've got the Indominus, and then down here you can see again the Giganotosaurus and T-Rex, both of which have been released already in the past. It looks like we are now back to this coloration for the Rex, though, which was the original color, whereas the more recently released version in the individual packaging had a Dominion-style coloration with a darker brown. But definitely psyched to see this one, so let's pop it out of the box right now. So here is our Sound Surge Indominus, and we are not exactly sitting in the correct spot, I can tell you that much. But looking at it here, it's kind of weird looking, actually. Like, you can really tell that this is an entirely re-sculpted figure. I actually thought that they would be releasing the original Indominus and just kind of, shrinking it down a bit and giving us a smaller version of it, but that obviously is not the case. This is definitely an entirely new sculpted figure, and you can really notice that with the head. The head looks so strange on this one. I'm not sure why it looks so weird. Like, I'm not sure why they went through the trouble of resculpting it when they had a perfectly good Indominus head sculpt before, and making it look so awkward. Like, the palate area is not really elaborated on the sculpt, it's just bulkier in the face compared to what you actually see on the Indominus. And I felt like the original Indominus from Mattel was a really good version of it as far as the sculpt goes, and now we have this version, which obviously is not that great. It actually almost reminds me, if you look at it right here, again, this depends on how long you've been collecting the Mattel Jurassic World line, but when the Mattel Jurassic World line was kind of about to release the initial Indominus, we had this really blurry sort of promotional image that had come out of the Indominus. You couldn't really see it. You could just sort of make out what it was going to look like roughly. And that looks like it right there. Like, that looks like the image that we had seen as far as the overall appearance and positioning of the body and everything. To my, as far as I can remember, it could be a little bit different, but it really does remind me of that image as far as the overall positioning goes. Regardless, again, I'm very excited to take a closer look at this, even if it is a little bit strange looking, so let's jump to that closer look right now. Starting up here at the head sculpt of our Indominus, again, I think now in a nicer light and up close, you can really see how different the head sculpt looks of this one compared to every Mattel Indominus that we've had since. Again, the features of the face just aren't as defining as they normally are. Like, the eye socket area is usually a little different looking. The palate area is a little different looking. Even back behind the eye just looks a little different normally. This has a kind of a bulkier look to the head more so than your average Indominus Rex. It still has some pretty nice looking texturing to the skin though. You can absolutely see some beautiful fine detail throughout. You've got the nostrils sculpted out right there. You can see more really nice looking scale detail here on the lower jaw. A dark wash on this figure would really highlight the scale detail. We do have an articulated jaw. You can see a nicely sculpted out tongue in there, and just generally the entire inside of the mouth has some beautiful looking detail to it. The upper side has some detail, but nothing incredible up there, but the lower jaw definitely has some really nice looking sculpt and detail. You've got the skin flaps and everything there. It kind of appears as though we do have somewhat of a gloss coat for the inside of the mouth as well. Not a super strong one, but definitely a slight gloss coat going on in there. And the teeth, even though they're not painted specifically, you can see they as well do have a gloss coat to them. Definitely a pretty obvious gloss coat. Weird that they would go through the trouble of putting a gloss coat on the teeth, but not actually paint them any other color other than the color that we have for the figure. You can see that we do have the primary kind of like a light grayish tone for the body of the Indominus, and then you have a darker gray that kind of borders around the eye area. The eye itself is painted with an orange, and it does have a black pupil. It looks quite nice. It's nicely placed. Same goes for this eye over here. Yeah, it's pretty nicely placed overall. Definitely looks fairly decent. As we lead up here, you can again see those kind of classic Indominus crests right there, those sort of scoots running up and over the snout of the Indominus. And as you lead back, you start to pick up on all those ridges and kind of like osteoderms and stuff there, as well as some of the quills up here on the back of the neck of the Indominus. They are slightly kind of flexible, but not really. As you lead down, you again have more really nice scale detail. You've got a few more skin wrinkles down here in the lower part of the throat, and then leading down into the body, you can kind of see some more creasing as you reach down toward the shoulder. Leading down, you have a cluster of osteoderms here at the top of the arm, some nice muscle definition as you move down into the arm, and you also have some more quills there leading off of the back of the arm. Again, the actual scale detail is really nicely done on this, like super vibrant on the sculpt. Leading down, you've got a pretty nice looking hand sculpt. Again, no painted nails, unfortunately, if my camera would focus on it, but it does look pretty nice as far as what it is. You kind of have some scoots running down the fingers as well, and I kind of see like a little extra like material in there, a little extra plastic or something connected to the one finger, but it is a pretty nice looking sculpt outside of the head sculpt. I will definitely say that. You really need a nail paint though. But as you lead up here, you can again see some more of that darker tone picking up very briefly here in the back. You can see it kind of starts like in the lower part of the neck, but ends before we even reach the hip region. And then we have no other color as you lead out the length of the tail. But you can see again that we have some more of those ridges running along the back of the Indominus. You do have a button for the action feature as well. Some more kind of larger scales and stuff right there. Leading back into the leg, you can again see more clusters of osteoderms, as well as just quite a bit of difference when it comes to the appearance and size of the scales. You can see each and every scale seems to be a different size throughout, although they are larger running along the front of the thigh and definitely decrease in size as you move back along the back of the thigh. Nice muscle definition as well. As you move down, you've got some nice creasing there in the joint of the knee. You have the kneecap itself, and also a nice calf muscle right there. As you lead down into the foot sculpt is actually gorgeous. That is a beautiful looking foot sculpt for the Indominus, and you can see we have swivel ankles to kind of pull the foot out, take a nice look at it. You could definitely see the gloss coat on the nails, but again, no nail paint, just a nice gloss coat, which is baffling to me as far as why they would do that. Really beautiful scoots down the toes, though, and nice wrinkling and everything. It looks really good. You've also got the dew claws present, but again, they don't have paint, nor do they even seem to have that gloss coat like you see on the other toes. But as you lead back up and you lead out the length of the tail, you can see all the osteoderms and everything kind of decrease in size. The ridges disappear. We do have them slightly pick back up a little further out into the tail before disappearing completely. And again, look at how nice that detailing is. Like, that really pops on the sculpt. So even though it's not the best Indominus sculpt ever, it does have some of the nicest sculpt and detail I think I've seen on a Mattel Indominus. Of course, you're not going to see too much over here on this side any different from the initial side, except for the fact that we do have the battery compartment as well as the sound area on the side, very visible on the left side of the Dinosaur, and that is something we've had with all of the Sound Surge figures. So at this point, if you are familiar with them, you'll definitely come to expect that You can see the arm sculpt and everything looks great over here, just like it did on the initial side. The only real difference is the fact that this leg is trailing, whereas the opposing leg is leading, but everything sculpt and detail-wise over here looks absolutely as beautiful as it did on the initial side. Again, leading out, you also have some nice detailing here for the underside of the Indominus. So, even though the Sound Surge figure, definitely the line is not the best in the world, and even though this Indominus is a little ugly in the face, it still has some pretty nice looking sculpt, and it's still quite cool to have an Indominus in this size range. As far as a size goes for a length, you are looking at about 14 inches, pretty much on the dot, or around 35.5, closing in on 36 centimeters. The highest point looks to be the tail. That's about 5 inches or around 12.5, approaching 13 centimeters. And then the highest point to the back of the quills here on the neck is, again, roughly close to 5 inches, or pretty much the same height as the tail, just slightly smaller. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Sound Surge version of the Indominus Rex. And you can quite clearly see that this figure is much smaller than your normal Indominus Rex, but at the same time fits right in the same size range as your standard Sound Surge figure. Then for another comparison, we have a standoff that I wouldn't mind seeing. We've got the Giganotosaurus and the Indominus Rex. Now both of these are Sound Surge releases. This is the Sound Surge Giganotosaurus next to the Indominus, and you can definitely see they're about the same size. You can also take notice to the similar appearance of those kind of interlocking teeth. They look pretty much the same on both figure. But again, they are pretty much the same size, so if you happen to have the Giganotosaurus, you'll clearly see that they are a similar size. It kind of looks from this angle like the Indominus is a little longer, but that's just the fact that it's a little closer to us. It is definitely right there in the same exact, pretty much, length department as the Giganotosaurus. But for another comparison, here is the Hammond Collection Concavenator next to the Indominus Rex. Now, the Concavenator is right there in the same similar size range to like the Ceratosaurus, the Baryonyx, and stuff like that. So if you have one of those figures, then this should help to give you an idea of the size of the Indominus. And then when it comes to a dinosaur that would probably hold a pretty big grudge against the Indominus, we have an Ankylosaurus here. Now this Ankylosaurus would be one of the adult versions in the main line of Mattel, so it's sort of like in the Roar Attack, Roarivore size range. Again, showing you that this Indominus is much smaller than your average Indominus Rex. And then for one final comparison, we've got the Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus, both from Mattel, the Jurassic World line, and you can see again that the Indominus, although larger obviously, isn't all that much bigger compared to where you would normally find an Indominus being next to these figures. So it still is pretty cool to have an Indominus in this size range, even if the figure as a whole is not the best looking version we've had. Also, being a Sound Surge figure, one of the, most exciting aspects, I guess, for the figure would be the fact that we have sound. There's a little button up here on the top to push. And I definitely do like the fact that we at least have a few different sounds for the Indominus, not like just one, and we call it a day. We do still have at least a couple different noises for this version of the Indominus Rex. So this Mattel Jurassic World, I guess you could call it Dino Tracker's Sound Surge Indominus Rex, is kind of fun, but I mean, it's cool to have an Indominus like this, a slightly different size, well, not even slightly, a pretty big difference in the size compared to the other ones, but the head sculpt is honestly quite hideous on this version compared to the original Mattel Indominus, and also compared to the way it appears on screen. It definitely looks quite different, and of course the entire figure as a whole suffers from your usual Mattel problems like larger feet, short tail, stuff like that, but we're pretty much used to that at this point, especially when it comes to the main line. I don't see things like that being corrected anytime soon. Even still, I will say it's probably one of the cooler Sound Surge figures that have come along, just because we don't have that much color on it and it doesn't look bad because of it. Like a lot of the figures, like if you look at the T-Rex or the Giganotosaurus, things like that, they'll look really awkward, especially the Carnotaurus is like really super awkward looking because there's so little color, as these are basically like basic figures, but like one step up as they have sound and jaw articulation. But again, the lack of paint would normally make the figure look pretty bad, whereas this time it's not so bad because the Indominus isn't really all that colorful, and the figures that we had come before this kind of had similar coloration as a whole. The one thing that definitely was better about the other ones than this one was, of course, the fact that we did have nail paint, at least on the feet anyway, whereas this one we don't have any nail paint, but they did go through the trouble of giving it a gloss coat on the nails and on the inside of the mouth, which is strange. You should have just gave it paint, it would have been better, rather than a gloss coat. Outside of that, though, it does sport some pretty fun articulation, and I love the fact that we have an articulated jaw for the figure. That is super awesome. We have very few figures in the Mattel line that have just like a straight-up articulated jaw, especially when it comes to the Indominus, so it's neat to have an Indominus with just a straight-up articulated jaw in the Mattel line. Of course, the seam for the articulated jaw, though, is really quite ugly, as are all of the Sound Surge figures. I don't know why they do it that way when they've obviously perfected the articulated jaw in so many other figures. I don't know why they switch it up for these Sound Surge versions, but it is definitely ugly the way that they do it for these figures. But again, we have the jaw articulation, you also have shoulder articulation, hip articulation, ankle articulation, and tail articulation. So we do at least have some decent articulation, a little more than you would find on a regular basic figure for the Sound Surge versions. The one side looks great, though, as far as not having any issues as far as weird seams or openings, but the other side, the left side of the dinosaur, is completely littered with that, as we have the battery compartment and the sound area. Now, I know all the Sound Surge figures have this, but I really think they could benefit from having that on the underside or just somewhere that's not as obvious. It does allow the Indominus noise to be pretty loud because it's like right there in your face, but it still takes away from the overall appeal of the figure. So as a whole, it's definitely not the best Indominus that we've had from Mattel, and it actually might be one of the worst because the head sculpt looks so strange, but it's also not one of the worst figures ever from Mattel because just in general, it is pretty fun to have an Indominus, again, in this size range, and it's just cool in general to also have another Indominus, as there aren't all that many from Mattel, and I really don't think we'll get very many until we get maybe like a Hammond collection at some point. I would definitely love to see that. But if you are interested in picking this up, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that on Big Bad Toy Store, where I purchased mine. So make sure you check that link, go grab this very interesting Indominus, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.